There was a bishop one time, and he told the politician to go out into the rain and lift his head heavenly. And he told him, he says, now this will bring a revelation to you. So the next day, the politician came back to the bishop and he said, listen, I followed your advice. I went out into the rain yesterday and I held my head up, to the sky. And as I tilted it kind of backwards, and he said, no revelation came. And so he said, the water just poured down my neck. And he said, and I felt like a fool. And the bishop said, well, isn't that quite a revelation for the first try? And so Paul, in chapter 5, verses 15 through 21, one of the things that we've kind of been talking about is that a lot of times you need to understand that life presents itself with choices. And you've got to decide which choice you make. God doesn't force, even though you're His child and He loves you, He doesn't force you into the choices. He will allow the choices to be presented and will give you the proper advice. He will give you the proper leadership. But you're the one that has to make the choice. He won't make the choice for you. And this is what a lot of times people don't understand. They think, okay, once I get saved, and once I become a child of God, then God will always tunnel me into the way He wants me to go. Now, He will give you that path. But if you choose to stray, that's not on Him. That's on us. And what Paul is going to talk about tonight in these verses is he's going to talk about how can we walk wisely. And when we walk wisely, when we make the correct choices, we will find that two things are going to happen. Number one, your walk with the Lord is going to get closer. Number two, Satan's going to blow you away because he doesn't want you walking that path. He wants to divert your attention. And I've shared this with multitudes of people lately to try to help people to understand. I hear people all the time that'll tell me, I don't know how Satan operates. And I said, oh, yes, we do. We absolutely know how Satan operates because he has always operated the same way. He has not changed in one way or another. And the reason that he doesn't change is because he found out it works. So if I'm doing something that continually works and I keep getting the same results every time, then why should I change what I'm doing? I just keep doing it. So in verse 15 through 21, Paul says this. He says, listen, now pay careful attention then to how you walk, not as unwise people, but as wise. He says, making the most of the time because the days are evil. 17, he says, so don't be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. Don't get drunk with wine, which leads to reckless actions, but be filled with the Spirit, speaking to one another in psalms, hymns, spiritual songs, singing, making music to the Lord in your heart, giving thanks always for everything to God, the Father, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, submitting to one another, he says, in the fear of Christ. So when you begin to look in here, he starts out, he says, pay careful attention then to how you walk. So when you look, does the King James say, like, be very careful?
Which verse?
NIV, verse 15. The NIV says, be very careful. Holman says, pay careful attention. And what does the King James say at the
See then that ye walk circumspectly.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. So if I was to say to you, you need to walk circumspectly, what would you say?
What do you mean?
You go look it up in the dictionary.
You would right.
You know a new word.
You know, I've learned a new word that I'll never use again, right? Because people don't talk about walking circumspectly. When he's talking about walking circumspectly, it's the same thing, being careful where you walk. Because if you've got one or two choices. When you walk, you actually have three, okay? But you'll see some people sometimes walking around like this, and they're focused on one or two steps in front of them. And generally what will happen to them?
They'll run into something.
You'll run into someone or something or whatever. If you run into the wrong person, they may beat you up. And that may cause some damage. If you're not watching where you're walking, you could walk into a pole, you could walk into a car, you could walk into something. So some people will walk and they're only looking at 2 steps in front of them. And that's about as far as they see. They don't see very far, or 2 feet in front of them, okay? And then you've got other people that walk around like this. And they really are looking up and never watching what they're doing. So when he's saying to walk circumspectly, what he's basically saying is that you walk upright with your eyes focused. Because when your eyes is focused this way, right here, you got peripheral vision, so you can see what's to the outside. Plus, you can see a lot farther in front of you as to what's ahead of you. And this is why he says, pay careful attention, okay? Or as the NIV says, be very careful. So so Paul starts out by saying, okay, when you're walking, and he's talking about the Christian walk, okay? But you can take that, and basically, you can use it as a natural walk and transfer that over into your spiritual walk. Because, and this is why God says to always keep your eyes focused to what's ahead of you. Because when I've got my eyes focused ahead of me, there's one thing that you learn, and that is when he talks about, Paul talks about the armor of God, putting on the whole armor of God. You're not putting anything to the back. Because the one thing that you need to understand, and that is this saying that we use, I've got your back, God has been saying that forever. It's nothing new. We say it and fail to realize that, a lot of people say, well, I don't believe in God, but they'll use the expression, I've got your back, all the time. Failing to realize where half of the conversations and half of the sayings that they have actually came out of the Bible. And they fail to realize it. So if I'm walking circumspectly, if I'm paying careful attention or being careful in my walk, and I'm focused straight ahead, I can see what's going to hit me from the side. And if God's got my back, then I'm really not concerned about what's behind me. Once I turn around and start looking at what's behind me, it's when I start getting into trouble also. So Paul is saying, here's what you need to do. Be careful. Pay attention in your spiritual walk. Keep focused. And if you'll do this, you'll walk wisely. Because once you start looking down, once you start looking up, and once you start turning your head to one side or the other, you're going to get in trouble. Because you always need, there's the other saying that, if the blind lead the blind, they both fall in the ditch. Go over to Matthew chapter 7 and verse number 13. If you got it, go ahead.
Enter ye into the straight gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leadeth into destruction, and many there be which go in thereat.
Okay, so he says, walk and enter into the straight gate. Okay, so he starts talking about, here is an easy path. That if you stay on the path that I've marked for you, it's an easy path. Straight is the way. Okay? But what happens a lot of times is we follow the advice of the last half of that verse. Because he said, broad is the way that leadeth into destruction. Now, we'll get to it in a minute, but let me take the illustration that Paul used here back in verse number 18 of Ephesians chapter 5. I'll show you something different about this verse than what you've been taught a lot. And a lot of people will use this verse for something that is totally different than what it needs to be used for. But Paul, in what he's using it for, it's very astute in what he's saying. Okay? If you go back to Ephesians chapter 5 and verse number 18, what does it say?
Be not drunk with wine, wherein is excess.
Okay.
But filled with the Spirit.
Right, but rather be filled with the Spirit. Now think about this for a minute. If you go back to Matthew chapter 7 and verse number 13, where he says, straight is the path and narrow is the way, okay, that leadeth to righteousness. But broad is the path that leads to destruction. Now, when you come back here to what Paul's saying, look at this for a minute. Don't be drunk with wine. He's talking about walking wisely. Have you ever watched how a drunk walks?
They're all over the place.
Yeah. How do you tell, if you get pulled over for a DUI or for suspicion of drinking, driving under the influence, what's the first thing they ask you to do?
Step out of the car.
That's right. Step out of the car because we're going to do a test.
Yeah. Now, I haven't been pulled over. That's a lot of cops.
That's what they all say. I've never had this happen to me, but I've watched a lot of TV. But you think about it here. And the analogy that Paul uses here is totally different than what we've been taught all along. Because all along we hear this, don't be drunk with wine, we're in its excess, but rather what you need to be is filled with the Spirit. But you think about the analogy that he's using here in going back to Matthew chapter 7 and verse number 13 and bringing those together, where he says, straight is the way. Wide is the path that leads to destruction. If I am sober and they ask me to walk a straight line, guess what I'm probably going to be able to do? Unless I really have some type of problem walking, I am probably going to be able to walk this straight line. The problem is when they start telling you to do the kung fu, lift your leg and stand on that, and they'll tell you, that is like, give me a break. What does that have to do with, I can't do that when I'm sober. I might be able to do it when I'm drunk, but I never know. But if I am sober and filled with the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit is controlling me, I'm able to walk that straight path. But where he says, be ye drunk with wine, okay, he uses the drunk with wine because that's the illustration that they can understand. Okay? Being drunk with wine means that you are no longer in control. Something else is controlling you. And when we're not following the direction of the Holy Spirit, something else is in control. We've allowed Satan to flood our minds and flood our thoughts because our thoughts are what are controlling us and what we're thinking. That begins to start controlling. Your brain is what starts sending signals to all parts of your body. When you have your senses, the five senses that God has given you with the feel, touch, smell, hear, and see. You've got those five senses. All of those senses and those nerve endings and stuff are basically relaying information to the brain. The brain is taking all the information, putting it all together, and giving you thoughts of, well, hold on, I'm smelling fire or smoke or something, and it's telling me, okay, so when there's smoke, there's fire, and so that means I need to do something. Okay, when I start hearing certain sounds, noises, whatever, that gives me a warning signal of something's up. If I taste something, like if you're sitting there and you cooked a chicken or a meat, to eat. And you go to taste that and it tastes funny. Your senses are basically saying there's something wrong with this. Something's not right with it. And trying to warn you that maybe you don't want to eat this because it might be tainted. And you might get very, very sick. Okay? In the senses that God begins to start giving us and warning us about, He gives us so that we can stay on the right path. But when we get drunk, what happens is getting drunk deadens those senses. And we start doing stupid stuff. Most people, when they get drunk, are totally opposite of who they are when they're sober. Okay? You get somebody that doesn't hardly speak, and you get them drunk, and you can't shut them up. You get somebody that's very bitter and nasty, and a lot of times you get them drunk, and they can be the best friend in the whole world. Really, really nice, to get along with. But what happens a lot of times, and this is where Paul gives us an illustration, and if we look at it in the right context of what he's saying, then we understand. Okay, because we're talking about a walk, and Jesus told us about a walk, a straight walk, a broad walk. A drunk is going everywhere. And drunk, he uses a drunk with wine, but the drunkenness can be anything. And this is wherein I have a hard time, a lot of times, people, they want to hone in on the word wine that is used here, all the time, and use that as terrible. But yet at the same time, I had this issue when I was a rambunctious little preacher that was young, and all of these guys, they all taught about the deadly sin of drunkenness, And I kept asking him, well, when are you going to teach about the deadly sin of gluttony? Because they were all overweight. And they never would touch that subject. And I said, well, hold on a minute. You're getting on all these people that you're saying can't handle their liquor. What about you? You can't handle your food. You know? So come on, guys. Let's be fair here. What does the word drunk mean? The drunk means not in control of. Something else we're obsessing over. And this is what Paul is trying to say. That what happens is, he says, to pay careful attention to how you walk. And when you start paying careful attention, then it's in the walk with Christ. And paying close attention means that what I'm doing is I'm letting God do the driving. I'm focused on where is it, God, you want me to go? What path do you want me to walk in? Because remember what he says? He says, I will direct your paths. I will show you. You know, he says, I've given you the Holy Spirit to lead, guide, and direct you into the way in which you shall go. So if I'm paying careful attention to what God is speaking and what God is saying, then I'm not in control, He is. But when I get drunk, now the thoughts, I'm controlling what's going in there and what's coming out. And I'm going to be all over the place. And I don't know about you all, but the older I get, the more I realize, why do I want to weave like that when it takes a lot less effort to just walk straight? You know? So God, hey, here I am. I'm getting to the point where, God, I really do want to follow you because it's less effort. Because all I'm doing is following you. You know where the pitfalls are. You know where the danger zones are. And as long as I keep following you, you're going to tell me where they're at. You're going to warn me and keep me out of trouble. So it's smarter for me to really pay attention and let Him control. And this is why Paul says to pay careful attention. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into Proverbs chapter 2 and a couple other places in there. And we're going to read some verses also talking about the path, okay? Starting with Proverbs chapter 2 and verse number 13. I know, everybody's so shy.
Can we go back to the verse 12, because that leads into 13?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Wisdom will save you from the ways of wicked men, from men whose words are perverse, who have left the straight paths to walk in dark ways.
So look at what he starts talking about. And again, Proverbs written by Solomon with some very good advice. He's doing some perspective and giving us some things. And he starts talking about that he's rescuing those people from the way of evil, from the ones who say perverse things, but those who abandon the right paths, that what they end up doing is they're walking in the way of darkness. And you think about it for a minute. When most of the time when you would see a drunk, they're generally at night. You know, now it's all the time. You know, you can find it, but most of the time it is at nighttime. And I think I shared with you before where I lived and grew up in Hamilton. It was two streets, and it was a block on each side, 3rd Street and 2nd Street, and then there was an alley that cut down the middle, and then also went between the two. So there's an alley here and an alley there. Okay, Well, down on the very corner where everything got separated from Champion and the rest of the world, there was that was the corner. That was the corner bar, and then they had another bar later on that they put on the other side. But anyway, they had this bar, and that's where everybody would go in, and they would get their alcohol, and they would drink. Okay, my mom worked there in the kitchen as a cook, and so she would make all the food for everybody because people would come in and eat also, and so a lot of times, at the end of the night, after everything was all shut up and shut down, and then they closed down the kitchen, and so she would begin closing down the kitchen, cleaning up, and then starting to walk home, because we either lived right behind it or just right down the street from it. Okay, it wasn't that far of a walk home from my mom. But the problem was a lot of times that the drunks would start coming out, and they would start following her home. And she realized, I can outrun them, because they can't really run very fast. And if they do try to run, it's dark. They can't see anything. And so they're just going in every which direction. And unfortunately, I've seen some which actually fell and gashes in the head and blood spewing out. And as little kids, you see this and you recognize, and I think that's probably one of the reasons that I probably never ever drank, was because I just saw the effects of what happened and what it did. And so he says here, listen, there's these people who abandon the right path, and what did they do? They abandon the straight path, which is the right path, to go into the other path that leads to destruction. Or he says into darkness, okay? And he talks about, in here, he talks about that path is a disobedient path and a dark path. And if you think about it, again, using this in the same context, and this is why I try to tell you sometimes that if you look at the Bible in a completeness, you really begin to understand more and more of what it's saying to you, okay? Because remember what Jesus said. Jesus said, I am the light. And what is Satan?
Darkness.
The darkness, okay? So what does he say? He says that what do they do? He says, I'm going to rescue you from the ways of evil, from the one who says perverse things, and those who abandon the right paths to walk in the way of darkness. So if I abandon the right path to walk in the ways of darkness, then what am I abandoning?
God.
I'm abandoning God or the light. Okay, so I've got two choices, light or dark. I've got two choices, straight or broad. Okay, and when you look at these things, you begin to see how all of this relates together. And this is why I try to tell people that the Bible doesn't contradict itself. The Bible actually feeds more on itself when you begin to look at it to help to understand and explain more and more about what it is that he's trying to say. And the more and more we see this, to me, and hopefully you understand why I get excited, is because when I started looking at it in this context, and rather than in the way that I was doing it a lot, as I grew up, and I began to start marrying everything together and saying, okay, God, yeah, now I understand what you're saying when you're talking light and darkness, straight and broad, drunk, and with wine, or actually being filled with the Spirit. Now I understand what you're talking about when you're putting all these things together. And it's like a kid in a candy store finding something brand new for the first time in your life and absolutely enjoying the taste of this. And that's why sometimes it's hard for me to contain the excitement when I teach, because it's exciting to me because I've learned this, and I share with people that whatever I learn, man, I want to bring it, and look at it. And hopefully you see where I'm coming from, and it makes your life easier in walking that. But go down to verse number 14, okay, as we continue on.
In
No, in Proverbs. I'm sorry. In Proverbs chapter 2. We're going to hang here for a couple more verses.
2:14.
2:14. Yes.
Who rejoice to do evil and delight in the forwardness of the wicked.
Yeah. Look at who enjoy doing evil, and actually delight, or the Holman says celebrate. I mean, honestly, look at sometimes the people that do evil. And it's like they have a party. You think about it sometimes. People who get drunk. You know, or I know a lot in the field that I worked in, it seemed like every Friday, at work, everybody would say, okay, where are we going to celebrate, the week's over. So let's go somewhere and get drunk and chill out. And I'm thinking, why? What do you want to do this for? I mean, I want to celebrate that the week is over also, but I also want to get up tomorrow and enjoy tomorrow. I don't want to get up puking my guts out, or singing the song Toilet Hugging Blues. But he says, listen, they do evil and they celebrate it. They enjoy it.
I have written on the side of here, which I'm sure you probably had me do, I put rebellious.
Mm-hmm.
So I probably wrote that at some point when you were talking.
And it's they, it's like, I'm enjoying this. And he says that what have they done? He says, I'm trying to rescue them from the way of evil, from the ones who say perverse things. And not only do they say perverse things, there's also those who have abandoned the right paths to walk in the way of darkness, and they are enjoying what they're doing. And he says, this is what's happening when you go down that path. And now, go to verse number 15. In Proverbs chapter 2.
Whose paths are crooked and who are devious in their way.
Yeah. Now again, look at what he's saying. He's saying, when people start doing evil, what do? They start going from one spot to the next. And it's like, oh, I need to correct my path. Oh, I enjoy doing evil. Oh, I need to correct my path. And he says, what ends up happening is this path starts getting crooked on them. Because they're enjoying the evil. And they're just bouncing from one spot to the other. Remember what God said in the book of Genesis chapter 6 when he was talking to Noah, and he said, I'm going to destroy the earth. And what did he say? Why? Do you remember what he said? Why?
About the evil.
Yeah. He says the thoughts of men are evil continuously. He says they're getting more and more evil all the time. How was it? I woke up this morning and I got through with everything, and I was just sitting down, and I was watching TV, and every once in a while I go to the show. It's Forensic Files. Mm-hmm. You ever see these cold cases and all this stuff? There was a guy on there, and this guy, he had actually, what was it? The lady was working in a. Was she in a convenience store? I don't know. Can't remember where it was. But anyway, this guy had actually abducted this girl and took her to his house and did some stuff. But he blindfolded her and didn't realize that she could actually see through the blindfold. And so what ended up happening was she was able to tell the police that that he drove a car and had a Magnum emblem on the dashboard. If you remember, I think it's only a Dodge or a Chrysler that had that Magnum ingrained. There was grain, and that he had stopped at an ATM to get money, and then basically dropped her off. And so they were able to find out who this person was based upon, okay, there was only so many people that had this type of car. And then they cross-footed with people that had made an ATM withdrawal in that area, and there was only one person, okay? So they go and they find this guy, and they arrest him. And come to find out that this guy was I want to say an EMT, but or some type of a medical profession, and was having problems with his wife. We're getting a divorce, and this guy was just like so nonchalant talking about how, and he led him to 10 other women that he had killed. And the way he was talking, they asked him, "Why did you do it?" And he says, "I don't know. It's not me. I don't know why. I turned into this." And I think, and I'm sitting there thinking, hold on a minute. Your thoughts had to be on, abducting these women. And one of them was a 10-year-old little girl that they abducted and killed. And I'm thinking, yeah, there's your thoughts that are evil continually. That is a crooked, perverse path that these people are walking. I don't know if you've read the news. If you remember the guy Ted Bundy, who was a truck driver, I believe, and had killed a lot of women all over the country, and actually ended up getting caught in Florida, eventually being put to death. But prior to his time of being put to death, he actually became a Christian and started telling why and what happened to him that led him down that path from pornography that he found that his father had, and as a teenager that caused this sexual desire to be in the way. And I saw they're making another movie about his life, and they're filming it in Cincinnati. And a lot of people say, why are they filming it in Cincinnati? Larry Flint. You also had Playboy Club.
Yeah.
That was down there. A lot of the Chicago mob, Al Capone, they would take the train from Chicago through Hamilton to Cincinnati. And if you ever go down what is called Martin Luther Boulevard, there was a place, I don't know if it's still there today, but it was a while back. It's called a Grand Hotel. And prior, there was prostitutes upstairs and a pool tables and stuff downstairs. And Al Capone would actually pay the kids to be the lookout, in there for the cops. But that, and a lot of people do not realize that there was this huge mob connection between Cincinnati and Chicago and Hamilton. That's why a lot of people don't realize that that's why they called it Little Italy in that area, because that's where the mafia had come and they had settled in that spot. History. But coming back, he says, look at what he said, and he says they're crooked and they're devious. Now go down to verse number 18 in Proverbs chapter 2.
For her house inclineth unto death, and her paths unto the dead.
The house begins to sink and it dies. Okay, and are ways to the land of the departed. It totally. You think about it for a minute. You know, as I was sharing with people, and I received an invitation about a week or so ago. You all know that the huge problem with opioids in Middletown is so they're actually bringing in. I don't know if you remember a guy by the name of Darryl Strawberry, who was a baseball player for the New York Mets. Played along. Darryl Strawberry and Dwight Gooden were on the Mets, and when they were building this dynasty and a super team. But Darryl Strawberry ended up destroying his career the same way what Josh Hamilton did, who also played for the Cincinnati Reds with Chicago and stuff, and has now got his life kind of straightened out. But all of these guys, they ended up destroying their lives because of drugs, and you know, they got into the heroin and the coke and stuff that they were doing. And so Darryl Strawberry has actually gotten out of this lifestyle now and has become a Christian. And him and his wife, I want to say Christina or something, but I'm not sure if that's her name. But they're actually coming to Middletown and going to be speaking. And they asked me, they said, hey, would you like to be one of the pastors that sits in a roundtable discussion, you know, about what's going on in Middletown? And I said, oh, absolutely. You know, I would love to, you know, share, because as I've told some people, you know, it's amazing because in my life, you know, I'm not a goody person, but I've never really fallen to the point of drugs and alcohol. Okay, number one, I drank alcohol for a while, but I couldn't get drunk, and so what's the use in drinking it? You know, if it's not going to make you drunk, you know, this ain't no fun. And so I was always a designated driver for everybody. You know, and the drugs, number one, I was always had this fear of needles. And so you don't have to worry about that one, man. You ain't bringing no needle near me. I'll pass out before I get the needle injected.
It could be a bad drug.
You know, I know. And so I've kind of gotten out of it. But I said, but you know, the thing that is I have watched families around me, and it's like, yeah, you know, what can we do to help these people? You know, what is it? Because we're evidently not winning this war. You know, when they talk about a war on drugs, you've had the war on drugs. You know, and this war has been going on a lot longer than Vietnam. You know, and it's still going on, and the deaths are just astronomical, and you know, to the point of an epidemic. And I said, you know, actually, and this is what he begins to say. He says, listen, when you follow down this path, that what's going to end up happening, and he talks about her house sinking down to death, and her ways to the land of the departed spirits. Basically, what he's saying is that if you continually follow this path, you're going to die. It's going to overtake you and it will kill you. Because it will totally, totally destroy you. And this is what people don't understand. And this is why sometimes I just wish that I could just get them to understand. Christians that will walk away from God and they say, no, I'll be okay. No, you won't. Because what's going to end up happening, the further and further and further away from God that you get, the further and further that you're finding that your testimony is dying. To the point where you talk to people about being a Christian and they laugh at you. They're not taking you serious. You want to talk to me about Jesus? Where are you getting off? Talking like that. You're no better than me. As a matter of fact, I see you in a lower state that I'm in. And this is what he begins, this is what Solomon is trying to say. Because Solomon went down this path. He's giving you his life story. He's saying that I took the wisdom that God gave me, that gift of wisdom, and I destroyed it. I watched everything around me fall apart. And saying it totally sunk. My house sunk. My life sunk. To the point where it's almost like I'm dead. And he says, this is what's happening. Go down to verse number 22.
But the wicked shall be cut off from the earth, and the transgressors shall be rooted out of it.
Yeah. The wicked will be cut off from the land. If you go back up to 21, look at what it said. For the upright will inhabit the land, and those of integrity will remain in it. But those who don't, they're cut off. And you think about it. Who's going to inherit the earth?
We are, the Christians.
The righteous. And the other unrighteous, they're not going to get to experience this. And see, this is what people don't understand. When God goes to recreate everything back to a perfect state with no sin, what is that?
That's the new heaven,
Or,
isn't it?
new earth.
Yes, or the new earth.
It's Eden. It's the Garden of Eden, where he took Adam and he placed him in a spot, and he said, here, this is your spot. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to take care of it. It's yours. And I'm going to come and visit you every once in a while. And I'm going to sit down and I'm going to talk with you. And hey, by the way, this place is awesome. So let's me and you take a walk. And let's just talk about this. And I don't know about y'all, but we all the time talk about, I want to walk on the streets of heaven and all this. And that's awesome and that's great. Okay? But to me, the greatest part is my little plot of ground that God has given me dominion over. And He's going to come visit me and check out how good I'm doing. And at the same time, He's going to sit down and talk with me. How long? Oh, about a minute or two. But how long is that? You know? And honestly, this is the stuff when I begin to just imagine. Everybody wants to imagine all of these other things, and I'm saying my imagination says I'm ready to sit down and talk and walk with Him. I really want to hear what He's got to say. Because one of the things that you got to understand is He will always speak the truth. And what's awesome about this is He's not one time going to say, hey, remember when you were alive as a human and all those bad things you did? I want to talk to you about those things now. Let's have a father-son talk. He ain't going to do none of that stuff. It's going to be awesome. They'll just sit there and say, hey, how's that plant over there doing? Did you trim it today? Oh yeah, we got it, And to think about it, no more rain. There's just going to be a dew coming up and just watering everything. And it's just fascinating. And He says, but that's what we get to inhabit if we're walking the straight path, which is as a Christian. Go down to Proverbs chapter 13 in verse number 15.
Good sense wins favor, but the way of the treacherous never changes.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm getting there, man. My pages stick together. Yeah. But when he says, but the way of the treacherous never changes. So what does that mean?
I tell you what it makes me think of. My brother just wants to do his own thing and just go down this path. Nobody can tell him, give him advice. And his path is just nothing but nonstop hardship. That's what that makes me think of, is he just continues to make bad choices, and he doesn't want to hear anything from anybody about the choices that he's made. So he just lives in the gaumy mess that he's creating for himself.
And have you ever asked him what is the definition of insanity?
Right. Doing the same thing.
Same thing over and over and expecting different results.
But you know, I've worked at Beckett Springs, and those people come in there, they're on the drugs and the alcohol and stuff. Almost every one of them can quote from this Bible.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
and, you know, and they said, yeah, I know, you know, because I would talk to them. Everybody comes in, you know, I get my little piece in there
Right.
and stuff. And they'll quote things from the Bible back to me and stuff. It's like,
He probably had some good grandmas and grandpas
Yeah.
and moms and
But-
dads.
And again, the Holy Spirit, God said the Holy Spirit will bring these things to remembrance. But the thing, and it is when walking the way, the straight way, is a hard path. Walking the wicked way, he says, what was it? In 14, we have 13, 15. He says, but the way of the treacherous never changes. So guess what? That road is easy. It's easy to travel that road, like a ping pong ball, you know. And it's easy, once I get on that road, it's easy to stay on that road. It's hard to get off. And that's what you see at Beckett.
I have seen a few though that will say, hey, I listened to what you said. I talked to him last night and I haven't seen him back.
Uh-huh.
You know, it makes me wonder, did they get back, with Christ?
Right. And sometimes, I was talking with Diana, because like I said, one of the things that it bothers me more now, and not really more now, but it just has hit me really hard. As I've shared, was the one young lady, and she was a very pretty girl, 31, with the 9 kids.
Oh, yeah, I know.
And she came here, and we helped her, and we lost her. And she ended up, as I was talking to her husband, and just talking with him and saying, where did we go wrong? What happened? He said it wasn't you. He said she had back surgery and got hooked on the meds for the pain. And when they came out with the law that basically, with the doctors, they can't, recently where they started cutting down, now my understanding is pain meds, you can only get a 5-day supply or 5 pills,
And you have to go to a pain clinic.
and then you have to go to a pain clinic and stuff. And it was like, if you don't have, you don't have insurance, you can't afford, the medicine, a $10 shot of heroin, that you don't know if it's laced with fentanyl or not, and yet it'll get me out of the pain for a little while. That's a lot easier for me to afford than an $800 pain med that I can't afford. And so, yeah, it's an easy path to get on and to continue going on. But yet at the same time, you know, as I was talking with him, I said, but the problem is, I got 9 kids. That now, and these kids, when they came in here, man, they were very respectful, very polite, and you know, and it was because they were raised properly. You know, she was a single mother for a lot of the years until here recently, when she got married with this guy and moved to the area over by Trenton. But now where do those kids go? Because the dad was out there trying his best to provide for the 9 kids, and they weren't all his. Only the last 5 were, I think it was, and the other 4 were you know, she got pregnant when she was very young. And it's like, you're watching this path that they're following, and it's like, you know, and like that guy that came in here, and he gave us the name of Brian Adams, and I thought, man, I've heard that name before, and you know, and I never put 2 and 2 together. Somebody give me a name of Brian Adams. I just think that's who it is. But Brian Adams was the guy for the Beach Boys, the drummer, I think, or one of the singers. But come to find out what his real name was, you know, because he made the mistake of talking to Rick and telling Ricky that he knew somebody, and Rick says, I think I know that person. And coming to find out who the guy really was is a guy that's got 4 kids, hooked on drugs. His story is that he worked at AK and was getting a settlement from AK, and that's what he keeps telling everybody. But no, it's not. It isn't. He's hooked on drugs, and he just goes from place to place to place, and he gets people to let him in their house because I'm cold and I'm hurting. I've got cancer. I'm dying. You know, and they let him in, and he steals everything that they got, and goes and sells that or uses it, you know, and that's all he's doing. But yet, I sat down and talked to him. He knows the Bible, you know, and he would talk about his grandpa. And I asked the guy, and he says, yeah, his grandpa was a preacher, you know, and preaching these tent revivals all over the place. And he grew up knowing it. But now he's so strung out and so hung on this stuff that you talk to him, and you talk to him and you say, it's insane, guys. Because what are you going to do? You're going to do the same thing over and over and over again and get the same results. But then the unfortunate part about it is, I was talking to a young girl. She comes here to church. She actually had a seizure at Kroger's in the parking lot. And she was driving, and she doesn't remember putting the car into park. But somehow she put the car in park, and they were trying, you know, they were I guess the people were watching her have the seizure, and they thought that she had taken some drugs and was ODing. But while she's doing this, she was sharing with me, she still had her foot on the gas pedal. Wow. The whole time. But yet the car's in park.
Thank goodness.
You know, and that's what she's saying, you know. And then when the EMT people got there, but she also did some damage to her back from the jerking motion in the car, because she couldn't, you know, get out of the car. And she did some damage, I think, against the door and the seat. And she said that she came to and had called her husband, but the EMT people had you know, came, and they were talking to her, and they gave her Narcan. Didn't even ask. You know, the husband says she doesn't need Narcan. She's had a seizure. She has a seizure disorder. And because she was passed out, they gave her Narcan. The girl's got MS and epilepsy. And I sit there and I said, I understand, but I also understand this is Middletown. And when the EMT pulls up and there's somebody passed out,
Narcan.
it's Narcan. Because number one, they're watching this, and they're watching this path of destruction. You know that's going on. I was watching the news, and the amount of death from opioids from 2010 through 2016 has risen somewhere in the neighborhood of 71%, I think it was. It's just outrageous. Okay, one more, and okay, and this will finish this one. And we man, see the bad thing about it, man. You give me an hour and a half on Sunday night, and I could feel it. Chapter 14 and verse number 12.
There is a way that seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are a way to death.
Yeah. So we've been talking about the wrong path, and the wrong path is an easy path to take. It really is. And he says, you know, there's a way that seems right to man, and they want to go down this path. He says, but you got to understand that going down that path is going to lead you to destruction. And so what Paul is trying to tell us, if you know, back in Ephesians, and we're going to grab some verses now back in the New Testament, and that is this, that we have a choice to make. The path that leads to destruction is an easy path. The straight path, you think about it for a minute. If I'm walking down the road and I'm walking a straight path, that would, to me, would be the easy path. Walking crooked would seem to be the more difficult path. And what happens is, what we want to do is we want to use logic and say, well, why don't I want to walk down the straight path? That, you know, that's
Kind of boring.
you know, really. But because we think, to us, you know, the path is straight. And what he's saying is, okay, so if you're thinking that the straight path is the easy path in all of this, but he says that there's another path that is crooked, and that's the path that a lot of people think is a lot easier. And it is. The crooked path is the easy path. And you think about it, in reality, it is. Because you've got to make choices on whether you want to take this detour or that detour. Or do you want to keep focused on God? Because Satan does the messing of the mind. And it gets hard sometimes to throw those thoughts out of there. You know? I mean, even Jesus. You think about it for a moment. And this is what sometimes people don't understand. Okay? When Jesus came out of the wilderness, after 40 days of prayer and fasting, how close do you think he was to God? Or let's just put us there. If I'm in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights, and I'm fasting and praying to God, how close do you think I'm going to get to God?
Extremely close.
I'm sitting in his lap.
Yeah.
You know, I'm close. But yet at the moment that Jesus came out of there, what did Satan do? He tempted him. Now think about this for a minute. Jesus has walked and fasted and prayed for 40 days and 40 nights, and as soon as he comes out of there, Satan tempts him. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. Now you think about it for a minute. Most of the time, we're not coming out of a 40-day fast and praying period. Most of the time, we're coming out of a night and into the day, and man, it is the pits. And our thoughts are like, you have got to be kidding me, Lord. I thought today was going to be better than yesterday. I didn't think that we were going to slip into this slump, you know. that it was going to be one day after another, after another, after another. And so when Satan is throwing stuff at us, and we think, oh, well, it's going to be easy. No, it's not. If you're coming out of a prayer and fasting for 40 days, and Satan is tempting you, and you're Jesus, ladies and gentlemen, we got some issues. The straight path is a hard path to walk. It is not easy. And he didn't say it would be easy. He just said it would be straight. But he said the other path, which is crooked, that's the easy path to take. And it is. It's easier for me to follow and do what somebody else tells me to do than to think for myself. I don't have to think about it. You throw the thought, I'll throw the motions. And that's why it's so easy to go down the path of destruction. There's not much thinking about it.
The sin nature.
It's natural.
I know a lot of people used to ask my husband, what does she do to have fun and stuff like that? He said, well, if you look at her, she's probably having more fun than we are.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't, doing what they were doing, but I still.
I mean, honestly, and I kid around about it, but I'm serious about it. When I tell people, if you come to Calvary, I want to forewarn you, this is not your mama's church. I'll guarantee you, it is not. And I get a lot of times, people say, why do you do some of the stupid things that you do? Why were you wearing that outfit? Why were you doing this? And I tell them, listen, guys, I believe that being a Christian is absolutely the most blessed thing in the whole world. And I can have fun. And you know what? Tomorrow when I wake up, I'm going to remember what I did yesterday.
Right.
And I'm going to relive those moments and relive the fun all over again. In the worship. A lot of times people say, man, it's like you're really enjoying yourself. You bet I am. I am having a ball. And it is. It's like I tell people, I get here in the morning, there ain't nobody here. It's just me and God walking through here and everything. And somebody say, but don't you hear noises? No, he's got them covered. I hear voices. If that's what you're talking to. But it's awesome because I get a prep time. Just me and him. And just walking the aisles and saying, okay, what songs are we doing today? Yeah, we got you. And it's like, if you look, and this is, we're finished with the deadly path and stuff, and we'll talk next time. But did you watch today's service, or as we participated in it? Did you see what was unfolding?
During worship?
Yeah.
You mean?
Okay. What was the first song? Remember?
There's power.
There is power in the name of Jesus. Okay. Now, my brother had not gone to the doctor until Thursday. Okay. We already had all the songs picked out. We'd already practiced all the songs on Wednesday night. Okay. And I've got no songs out there. So we look at the first song, and we're sitting there and we're singing the song, or I'm sorry, Break Every Chain was the song, Am I there? Is that the right song? Yeah, it was Break Every Chain. Okay, so what, you're talking about, Satan's got you bound and he's doing all of these things, and it's like there. The intro, I don't know if you watched the intro right before the worship, that I had a short video of a minute talking about being bound and broken and everything, and how with God's amazing grace, I'm no longer bound and broken, but I've been set free. And then we come into breaking every chain. Then we come into singing, he is the desert song. You know, even though I'm in the desert, you know, he's always there. Then we come to the song Singing Home, and then we go to the, you know, Beautiful One. As all of this unfolds, it just all comes together. And it's nothing that I've done. You know, he's doing it. And to me, these are the awesomeness of saying, okay, God, you know, and I'm not perfect by any measure, okay? Ask my wife, she'll let you know. She tells me all the time. And I'm sure she'll share the advice with you also. You know, and I'm not. I mean, I've got imperfections, and there are times that I get frustrated, you know, with myself and saying, why did you go there again? You know, that's not where you belong. That's not where you need to be going. You need to stay focused and everything. And it's like, okay, yeah, but yet when you sit there and you come after, I mean, I saw it starting to unfold, you know, and really hadn't thought too much about it until he got up to talk, and then I'm watching. Hold on a minute, we've got these other songs, you know, that are coming, and they're all folding together. And what I'm seeing is I'm looking back over the crowd. You all are having fun. You know, you're enjoying being in the house of the Lord. It's not like it's a chore. And that's what I'm saying. If we can get worship to understand when we come in here that this is not a chore, that this is some of the most awesomeness, to me, I'm partying. This is my Christian party on Sunday. And some people say, do you think that Jesus acted like that? I believe it with all my heart. I keep telling people I think Jesus was a party animal. They just, you know, I mean, you look at it. If he wasn't, why in the world would he go to a house of a tax collector and they're all drinking? You know, and he was accused of being a wine bibber with them. And I'm not saying that Jesus drank and got he had wine, I'll guarantee you that. But he didn't get drunk. Okay? But he was always in control. And to me, that's what worship is. You know, it is, I'm not in control, he's in control. And as long as he's in control, we'll have fun. And we'll enjoy it.
The words of the music was really hitting home for a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's good.
And it's just like, this is why I say to you honestly, and I'll do my pitch. If you honestly use those 5 cards this week and hand them out to people, and people show up, they will enjoy this church. They really will. You know, we are, by intention, different than everybody else. Because everybody's been to the other churches. And they go through the motions. And I don't want us going through the motions. I want us to say, okay, well, what's going to happen this Sunday? I want us to come expecting something. Because God will deliver if you come with expectations.
Hello, this is Pastor Chuck Cotton from Calvary Baptist Church. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for taking the time out to either listen to our sermon or to watch it on video. We are grateful that you've actually taken the time and hope and pray that it has been a blessing to you as it was to us as we delivered it to our congregation. We ask if you have any questions whatsoever that you email us at pastorchuck@calvarybaptistmiddletown.org, or you could come in and give us a phone call, if you would please, at area code 513-423-7251. I'd like to take this opportunity to also invite you to come to our church and visit us, if you would please. We actually have small groups on Sunday morning starting at 9:30, with our morning worship following at 10:45. Prior to our morning small groups, we also provide donuts with coffee, milk, orange juice, a time for fellowship, get to know each other, have a good time before we actually break out into our small groups for Sunday. Our worship services are uplifting. They're fast moving, and everything in our service is just a fast pace. But we do take time every once in a while to slow down as we feel the Holy Spirit moving, and we never want to hinder it in any way. We also have on Sunday evening, during the school year, we have Awana, and Awana starts with the Puggles, actually from age 2 all the way up through high school. And during that period of time, we also have a worship service. Both of these start at 6 o'clock and end at 7:30. Our Wednesday night, we have a Bible study, which starts at 7. We generally finish about 8:15. We would love for you to come and visit with us. Don't have to dress up. Just come as you are, because to us, it doesn't matter. You're a child of God, a creation of His, and so to us, you're important to everything that we do. Our motto here is building the kingdom one life at a time, and we hope that we have a chance to visit with you, get to know you as you get to know us. So thank you, and may God bless you.